This week's episode is sponsored by Pelican.
You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For 50 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. My name is Alan Weitz.
And I'm Jill Waterman.
And without a doubt, our audio engineer, Mike Weinstein, will be jumping in with a question or two along the way. So put up your dukes and get ready to immerse yourself in, as one of today's guests describes it, a high-intensity mashup of live theater, live sports, and live music. The full-throttle phenomenon we're referring to is the world of WWE, or World Wrestling Entertainment for our acronym adverse listeners. In 2023 alone, the WWE photo team traveled the world, covering close to 170 live TV shows and producing 2.6 million images to serve the WWE's various platforms. Joining us today to discuss how all of this content is created and disseminated are photo industry veterans Brad Smith and Rich Freeda. Brad is an award-winning photo editor and director of photography. He has over 35 years of experience under his belt, spanning the White House to the New York Times to Sports Illustrated, where he was director of photography. In 2017, Brad assumed his current role as VP for photography at WWE, overseeing the organization's global photography division. Rich Freeda has been shooting for the WWE for 30 years, with the last 2 as director of photography. Equal parts a portrait and documentary photographer, he brings more than an upbeat enthusiasm to his photography. He can work without rest for the 12 to 16 hours that it takes to make up a normal show day. His nickname is Starbucks. Brad Smith and Rich Freeda, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
It's great having you here. I want to start with a question for you, Brad. You've had an amazing career as a photo editor and DP with a long time focus on sports. And while wrestling is a sport, it's also, let's face it, a big-time entertainment, as we noted in the introduction, especially in the level that you're working at. Did you have to make any kind of adjustments to your thinking and or decision-making process when you joined up with the WWE concerning the photographic image as you viewed it in your head at that point?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. What had happened was I'd come from like 20 years of covering literally just full-time, big-time sports for everyone. And when I got here, even though it's athletic, it's not truly a sport in that way. It's sports entertainment. And it took me quite a few months to kind of realize it's not a sport. And it's not about the sport itself. It's more about the whole spectacle of the event. That's what we try to convey each time is we want people to look at the photos and see as if they were there at the arena, right? We want to show fans. A lot of sports photos, fans get in the way. We want them in our photos because we want them to be a part of it. So once I kind of had that epiphany that, hey, it's not a sport, it kind of changed the way I looked at everything that we do.
I get that. And Rich, what about you? I mean, you've been shooting pictures for 30 years for the WWE, and this encompassed the shift from film to digital and huge transformations both within the WWE and larger entities of media and entertainment. How have you evolved and adapted as a photographer given all of these transformations and changes within the industry?
Yeah, I think the changes are just part of the natural progression of being a modern-day photographer. I mean, when I first started working at WWE, we were shooting a show and putting our rolls of film into a bag and then shipping them off to a photo lab, and we'd get those images back 3 or 5 days later. Obviously, it's a much different scenario now with social media and digital and, all these different platforms that we're trying to feed to. But I've always embraced the change and embraced the new challenge of learning new stuff. I think it's one of the things that keeps photography fresh for me. And I mean, it's a very different animal than it was when we first started, but it's still just as much fun as it was from day one.
Here's a question I have, and this is for both of you, and it's kind of going a little bit off script, and that's fine because I like doing that. Playing fields aside, what, if any, differences are there between shooting for WWE and say, the NFL or major baseball? There are different parameters. One really big difference is that unlike football, baseball, and other field sports in which the action is spread over a large physical area, WWE events are A, always indoors under carefully controlled lighting conditions, and B, the action is confined to a relatively small, well-defined area.
It's no different than covering boxing in that way. I mean, boxing uses the exact same size ring and everything's going on in front of you in this square. And the difference is for us is that if you're shooting a boxing match, your focus is on the two men or the two women that are actually boxing. That's all you care about that entire night. Bob versus Dave, he's punching him, he's getting punched, he falls down, the referee, that's all that matters to you. And Rich and our team, we don't approach it that way. Almost one of the least valuable photos we have is two guys wrestling just by themselves, really tight. What we need is to show that whole spectacle, like I said before. So we approach it a little differently in that we want to convey all of the other portions of it, our branding, all of our signage, every bit of the fans, the announcers, anything we can get in there, and the superstars that we have, they become the center of the photo, but not the only part of the photo. And that's the difference to me in covering sports for so many years. You're really concerned about the athletes in sports primarily, and that's really almost 90% of what you do. Whereas we use them as the foundation for the photo, and then we build on it with all these other layers.
I would imagine it might be somehow a little bit easier or less of a challenge shooting WWE events as say compared to a football game where you literally your shooting field is the size of a football field, quite literally, which means that you have a lot more choices you have to make depending on where the players are. Whereas in your case, the two players are essentially in one small area. And something I'm curious about, I'm assuming that you're also using remote cameras in these events. It's not just the shooters that you have. What's the percentage of the photographs that you end up using, say stills and video, from people shooting, photographers, and remote cameras preset into specific areas?
Yeah, well, there's no video for us, that's for sure. And
okay.
The ratio is roughly 40%. Rich, you can correct me, but I think we have 2 cameras set up at every event for remotes, and then we generally have 3 photographers. So that's the ratio at an event that would be at something like Madison Square Garden. Now, obviously, photographers shoot more than the remotes, but there's 2 cameras for remotes, and then the 3 positions that we normally have, 2 at ringside and 1 about 20 rows back. That's kind of our 5-person team. And we utilize remotes in part because we almost are more like a team photographer for the Yankees versus somebody from Getty or Associated Press coming in with a press credential. They have limited access. They have limitations on where they can go, what they can shoot. We're like the team photographer. Rich is like literally like the team photographer. And he can go to more places. He can kind of play around. And that includes things like remotes, where it's harder for freelancers that are just coming in covering a Yankees game to set up remotes and everything, whereas the Yankee photographer could do that more freely, if that makes sense. Rich could expand on that for sure.
Yeah, our photography coverage is really integrated pretty tightly with our television production, and it's been like that since the beginning of the creation of the photo department itself. We have a very close relationship with not only the people who produce the shows, but also the television cameramen and the audio engineers, and all the people that are producing the show are people that are very familiar with us and our needs and our responsibilities for show coverage.
You're essentially a film crew. I mean, you have to be communicating, get along, essentially. You are one large team. It's a giant collaboration. And you all have the same goal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's to shoot and document and show the product in the best possible light. That's our goal each time.
You know, Mike here, Rich or Brad, I'm curious, when you have new photographers come on board, do you have to sort of retrain their instincts and sort of get them in the mindset of what, Brad, you were speaking to earlier? This is more than tight action shots. We want to see the entire context here. The wrestlers are just the main event, but there's a lot of stuff in the background. We don't need to be as selective as if we were shooting this as a boxing match.
Yeah, I could speak to that for a second, and Rich could add to it. First of all, we have kind of a core group. We have 3 staff photographers and about 15 or so around the world, really, and mostly in the US, a core group of freelancers that we use. And the hardest thing for them to learn and the most unique skill set is working ringside. You're tethered to a TV camera, you're listening on headsets, and it's a TV show. I mean, you can't forget the fact you are part of a TV show. And when we bring people in that have shot sports and so forth, if they haven't shot wrestling, and certainly if they haven't even shot boxing or something like that, absolutely, their focus would be to zoom in and shoot the action of two people engaging in combat, right? Whereas our team has a different look at that. And we do have to kind of say that a few times. And the first thing we do is we put them into something like hard camera, which again is like about 20 rows back, give or take, right? It's more of a center field kind of position. That is the area which has a general wide view of it. And you can't really do anything wrong up there. You know what I mean? There's no cameraman next to you really or anything. It's just kind of you shooting with a long lens. Rich can give you more specifics, but it takes a while to train somebody to shoot ringside because of the skill set involved where you have all these other components besides just taking photos. So, Rich, you could talk about training somebody at ringside and what that takes.
Yeah, the environment for covering our shows at WWE is really unlike anything out there. We have people on our team that shoot for the NFL, have worked for the NHL, have worked for MMA. It's really the gamut of comparisons, but everybody really requires a little bit of onboarding in terms of letting them know how we like to cover our shows. Because as Brad said, it's not just about the competition; it's really about the whole show. And that changeover in mindset for the photographers is often something that they struggle with. And there's a significant dance between the television cameramen who are covering our shows and the still photographers. As Brad said, we have two photographers that are working at ringside for every single televised event that we do. And we stand in very close proximity to them for the entirety of the show. And we need to all get along and at the same time gather our content. So it's a little bit of a dance and it's a big learning process. We usually try to bring people up slowly and give them an opportunity to cover some non-televised matches that sometimes happen before or after our shows so that they can get comfortable in that space. But it really is unlike anything else out there. There's really no comparison and there's no way to really practice it without actually being there.
The other thing that I find interesting is that when you shoot sports, I've done lots of sports. So think about where the basic meat and potato photo positions are for sports. In baseball, you're literally in a photo well, 1.5 feet from the dugout. You're on the playing field with the players. Basketball, you're sitting right on court side at the end of the court, right under the basket. And the same thing for football. You're on the sidelines, on the edge. You're 1.5 feet from stepping onto the field, right? So everything they're shooting is in front of them. It's as if the rest of the environment, the venue, the fans, everything else doesn't exist. They're vacuumed into what's playing on the field. I want a photographer to go 30 rows back, shoot through a bunch of hands, cell phones up, merchandise up. And then in the end, you find these two people wrestling, right? That's the ticket that sells it in the end. But all that noise in between, that's part of the photo that we love. So that's definitely one of the things that separates our strategy from shooting a football game.
Interesting.
Yeah, it feels like an inversion of that.
Exactly.
One thing that really struck me when watching a televised match was that there were no professional photographers to be seen anywhere on the live event. Is that a concern of photographers not to be picked up by the cameras?
That's very much by design. All of the production people that are working at ringside for our events are dressed in black, and oftentimes, we have cameras in front of our faces. So it's not that easy to pick us out, but that's really the way that it's designed. Historically, if you wanted to look back at the way that the shows used to be produced, when the show was produced in standard def, way back when, you can go and look at historical matches. There used to be a line of photographers that would actually be at ringside,
Exactly.
shooting those shows from the back end of the ring. When we went to HD in our transition over sometime in the mid-2000s, they restructured the way that people were going to be at ringside because the picture was much clearer. You could see a lot more. It was a little bit distracting for trying to tell the stories. And it was really the company's mindset of just trying to clean up the vision that they were bringing to the fans every single week. So the fact that you don't see us is probably the best thing because that means we're doing our job well.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows people to focus on what the brand obviously wants you to focus on, which is not Rich and not the cameraman. It's the two people in the ring.
Right.
So if you have somebody in the audience who shows up with a Canon or a Sony or a Nikon or something, and a 2 to 500 millimeter zoom. Yeah, and they're wearing a nice bright orange shirt or something, and they decide to come up closer. Are they allowed to? Can they do that?
No, they can't approach the ring. Their seat is their seat, number one.
Okay.
And it's very restricted around the ring. There's nobody allowed in there except the credentialed people. And all the credentialed people there work for the WWE. There's nobody in there that works for USA Today or New York Times or anything.
Gotcha.
If you're an outside source and you're getting a credential, which we do have happen, and that's part of our process, especially on our bigger shows like WrestleMania and so forth, there are news organizations that ask for credentials. They tend to get those positions that are more like the hard camera that I described. They're about 20 rows back. They're not at ringside. They're shooting it from that angle and from that position. And so that becomes like a photo position that we build just for them, but not the ringside. The ringside is off limits to anyone except
That's yours.
Except for my team. Only Rich and his team of photographers are the only people allowed down there.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. Makes sense. Makes sense. That's why you're there. That's why you're doing all of this.
Exactly.
What about the fans? I mean, when I was watching, I was sort of shocked to see so many fans with cell phones recording or taking pictures from their seats. And generally with big entertainment venues, any kind of even cell phone photography is not allowed. Does WWE have a different ruling in that manner?
So I think you could make the distinction between if you and I went to a Broadway play, you couldn't take your phone out and sit there and record and take pictures of somebody on the stage at a Broadway show. An usher would come down and tell you to stop, right?
Right.
And obviously there's less people there. It's easier to control. If you were at a concert, concerts specifically have a lot of really strict rules about recording and so forth because it's music, et cetera, et cetera. But if you go to any other sporting event, if you go to a Knicks game, if you go to a Giants game, if you go to a Yankees game, absolutely.
Go to a NASCAR race.
Go to a NASCAR race, any sporting event, virtually, you're going to find people with their phones out, taking pictures, doing video, whatever. I mean, it's one of those things that you couldn't control that if you wanted to. You're talking about 60, 70,000 people at a WrestleMania show, 20,000 people at Madison Square Garden. Obviously, some of that is up to the security that's at that building, if they have their own rules because it's their building. That might be an issue. But for the most part, the fans participate in that way. They record. There's obviously, some information on their ticket that would say, you can't sell any video or whatever. You can't monetize anything. But there's not a massive discouragement to not take pictures at an event for sure. I mean, it's just something I don't think you could police if you wanted.
Right.
Was that ever a conversation as cell phone cameras started to become more and more?
Yeah, I've only been here 7 years, so I missed that part when it started infiltrating. I imagine, like everyone else, there was a little panic about it in the beginning, but at some point you get overwhelmed by ants and your picnic is what it is,
Yeah, exactly.
Brad, I have another question for you. Since you're responsible for everything that happens under your wing there, you have 3 photographers, 2 remote cameras recording images at all of these events. First of all, assuming you're not dashing about like a madman during the show, where do you station yourself? Where's your ground zero? And how much oversight do you give to all of the visuals being produced? Are you eyeballing everything that comes in, or are there editors pre-selecting, pre-editing, and then forwarding you a select group of images that from there you disseminate to wherever they're going?
Yeah, I would tell you, number one, I've never had a ticket, so I've never had a seat or anywhere to sit. So that tells you one thing. I never get to sit down.
You should speak up. I mean, come on, look at your title.
We know people, Brad. We could hook you up.
I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That was good. Rich is the same boat. If he's shooting ringside, never gets to sit down for 3 hours, and that's how the show works. But primarily, I'm just making sure everything is running smoothly before it starts. Almost all of my work is done before the show starts, the things that I do.
Your pre-production, okay.
Yeah, and also to be clear, I go to a couple of shows a month. Rich goes to 1 or 2 like every week. It's a different level, He's there all the time. But when I physically go and I'm not at home or in the office, I am just making sure things are okay. I'm talking to all of our partners that we work with at the show, making sure their needs are met, because a lot of platforms, at the WWE need our photos for different things. And I'm making sure that they're, being satisfied with what they're getting. I do talk to the photographers when I'm there. Some of them have ideas. Some of them talk about the remotes. Hey, can we use this angle as we move things around? Rich is very, very encouraging to the photographers to, find new positions for our remotes and not just do the same thing all the time. So there's a lot of prep work to do. We get to a show primarily if it starts at 8:00. We get there around noonish or so, and we start to set up our studio, and then we kind of get ready. We go out and check rehearsals, and we go through all the things as the TV kind of runs through entrance music. We're just there kind of watching and so forth, getting familiar with the arena and making sure everything's working. And then about 5 till 8, Rich is heading out to ringside, ready to go. So my job is primarily just to make sure everybody's happy, everything's functioning. As far as the images coming through, I have an on-site editor at the venue, and that venue will then transmit from there back to our server in Connecticut. And then there's another editor that evening working the show to edit, to create galleries, to serve our social partners, and a few other broadcasting partners that we have. So they're sending photos to about 8 different platforms that night in real time. So I'm seeing stuff as they show it to me, but primarily they're handling it, and I see more of it after the show is over.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rich, it was mentioned that photographers and the cameramen all wear headphones during the live events. What actually is being transmitted? What are you hearing when you're working?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we're pretty tightly integrated with our television productions. And as we're photographing a live television show, the one thing that we don't want to do is be caught on camera unnecessarily. So the primary need for us to be wearing headphones at ringside while covering the show is so that we can hear the director of the show talking to the cameramen and calling the cameras so that we know what camera is on while we're shooting. So if we're working on one side of the ring and we know that cameras 3 and 6 are on the opposite side of the ring, when they're calling those cameras, especially if the superstars are on our side of the ring, we want to be aware of that so that we can not be framed into the shot. We can also hear the director specifically. They can talk to us directly and let us know if we're in the way of something or if they see us before they take a shot. So what we're hearing is the camera calls for the actual television production. And that's a real necessity for what we do. So not only we can hear what they're directing the cameraman to do, because a lot of times that informs us for what we need to capture visually, but also to make sure that we stay out of their way and we keep ourselves out of the sight lines of the television cameras.
Interesting.
So it's not only just concentrating on what's happening in that ring, it's concentrating on, get out of the way, there's incoming, essentially.
You're exactly right. And that's what I was alluding to earlier. The learning curve is really about being able to listen to all this information at once, at the same time try to take good pictures. And that really is the learning curve. We're also communicating with our photo editors who are there on site for the show. Our process for covering all of our events is when a match happens, there'll be an entrance, the match will happen, and then they'll leave. After every match, we'll hand off our cards that we're shooting. These are the non-remote cameras, or the ones that are actually operated by human beings. Those photographers hand their cards to the photo editors, load up new cards, the editors download, they make the selections and send pictures back to our servers in Connecticut. But our photo editors are also on those headphones. They also hear all the information that we're hearing, and we can also talk directly to them without crossing over into the television production. We have our own channel to talk to those guys. It's a fast-moving environment. It's sometimes you're pinned up against a barricade because you're trying to keep out of the way or something's happening. Sometimes you roll your shutter on your camera. So just there's a million small things that can happen through the course of the night. So they'll tell us if our exposures are off, or if there's a problem with the camera, or if everything's looking good. It just gives us an extra opportunity to additionally communicate about what we're doing through the course of the night.
I think this also plays to what Rich said earlier about it's a unique environment. And I think that obviously a lot of people feel that about where they work, and they're not incorrect. But if you look at it as along the lines of sporting events, of which I've covered tons of, I've been to Olympics and Super Bowls and stuff. And all of my photographers have one job to do. It's put a camera up to their eye and take a great photo. That's their job, right? And they have to be in position for it. And it's a huge responsibility. And it's this great skill and super, super talented people. And it's much respect. But our team not only has to put the camera up and take a great photo, they have to listen on a headset to the TV people talking to them. They have to be aware of all the things that are going on because it's a live television show and all that. So you add all those things as if the taking of the photo wasn't enough of a responsibility. You have to do these other things. And if you can't do them simultaneously, obviously you can't work for us. But I mean, it could lead to some really bad things. I mean, you could just get in trouble for being on TV, or maybe, some people are running your way that you weren't expecting or whatever. And these type of things make it extremely difficult to understand all the things that Rich and his team have to juggle when they're shooting these shows, especially the ringside photographer.
It reminds me, back in an earlier life, I was working on film sets as a boom operator. So I'm designated with capturing the dialogue, but I'm also designated with not getting the mic in the frame. And those two responsibilities are at odds with one another.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know about you guys, but my brain could barely do one thing at a time.
Really.
I'm sitting here for 30 minutes holding this mic up in the air and hoping I don't drop it. And that's how my whole focus is on this microphone right now, right? So
It's very zen,
and I can barely do that. But, and that's a good point you bring up. I mean, making sure it's not in the way, the microphone and the boom, and then also doing your job, recording it and checking your machine and everything for the sound. That's a lot of stuff going on.
But it's that tension, I guess, that I was speaking to. I mean, I know as a part of the sound department for production audio, we always got along with the directors of photography and the first ACs and the second ACs, but there was a little bit of a tension there. I guess you guys are working as a team, so it doesn't really manifest, but there is some sort of like vague hierarchy, is I guess what I'm saying is that there's a TV show and everyone has to be out of the shot. I can kind of relate to that.
I think everybody on our team very well understands that this is a television show first. And while we're very, very dedicated to making the best pictures that we can, one of our primary responsibilities is to not get in the way. And that's where the balance comes in. And that's where the learning curve comes in terms of trying to learn the craft of being a ringside photographer at WWE. It's like it takes a long time, even for people that are experienced photographers, to get up to speed to learn how to work in that environment. And there's a lot of verbal and nonverbal communication that you have. There's a lot of shoulder tapping and hip tapping and letting them know, because these guys have a full video camera up on their right shoulder the entire time that they're working. And as if that's not physical enough, then they have a photographer standing next to them, and we have fast moving action on top of that. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we give them as much information as we can, verbal or otherwise, to let them know. And they have their own headsets, so there isn't a lot of talking specifically. We don't communicate with the cameramen through our headsets because they're on a different channel, but we can hear what's being said to them. But it really is a learning curve. But there's a great respect on going both ways for the work that we do there. We're all there trying to make sure that we capture the best images or video or still images of the content that we're producing every single week. And there are definitely times that it gets tense or crazy. I mean, the environment can be very fast paced and action packed, but that requires us to pay pretty close attention and do everything that we can to ensure that we're doing a good job and in keeping everybody that we're working with safe.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that if you're looking at resumes for a candidate as a photographer at your organization, if this person has combat experience, it's probably a big plus. Because seriously, I'm being serious. So it's like you do, and you get the hell out of the way, because incoming is not pretty. And it's the same thing. You just got to be careful and be aware of where you are and how you fill that space.
I will tell you that when I first got here, and going back to the beginning question, which was, what's the difference between this and covering traditional sports? And how did I look at it and how did I make the adjustment? I will tell you, when I was looking at photographers and I first got here, this was before I really got to know Rich and everybody, I was just feeling my way through. I instinctively thought, if we're going to hire new people, they have to be sports photographers. And now I don't think that at all. I don't think they have to be sports photographers. I'll tell you who I'd rather have. I'd rather have a photographer that is the tour photographer for Bon Jovi than somebody who's the Yankees photographer, because they understand that event is the important thing. And a solo picture of Bruce Springsteen, while that may appeal to some people, the great photo is Bruce Springsteen and that band on the stage and 20,000 people all with their arms up enjoying the show. That environmental photography of covering an event like that, how you cover an actual live event like that, those are the people that I want working for us. And Rich and I have a photographer that we use in the UK named Andrew Timms, and he's one of the newer ones to the team. He is primarily a concert photographer. He's actually the Spice Girls photographer when they did the reunion tour. I mean, he literally shoots concerts more than sports. And those people, I think, understand the production of what we do and are objective to what we're trying to do more than a traditional sports photographer. Doesn't mean the sports people couldn't learn it, but right off the gate, I think you're better off with somebody that covers actual live events like a concert.
It's a different sensitivity. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we come back. We're going to start talking gear and photo toys with Brad Smith, Rich Freeda, and the WWE. Stay tuned.
Carry all your photo and video gear safely through any weather with the Pelican 1510 TP carry-on case. The unbreakable case is made from a high-impact copolymer and features double latches, padlock protectors, and a pressure valve for the ultimate protection. The Pelican 1510 TP includes the TrekPack divider system, consisting of pre-installed wall sections, panels, and divider material that can be cut to your preferred configuration. The dividers are waterproof and the lid is lined with foam, so your gear will have all-around protection. And it currently meets FAA carry-on requirements, making travel easy. Head on over to bnh.com for more information about the Pelican 1510 TP carry-on case with the TrekPack divider system, or use the link in our podcast show notes.
Okay, we are back once again. And again, we are being joined today by Brad Smith and Rich Freeda from WWE. And let's start talking about camera gear. What's the deal with WWE? Are you all working with the same brand of camera? Does every photographer basically work out of their own little toy box with their own preferences? How do you work at a WWE?
Yeah, we have about, I don't know, between 15 and 20 photographers that contribute to the work that we do at WWE. And the vast majority of them are freelancers or subcontractors. The staffers and many of our freelancers use Sony mirrorless cameras, which have really been a fantastic addition to the work that we're doing there for a million reasons. I started using the Sony mirrorless cameras when I was doing documentary projects that required a quiet, small camera where I could essentially be a fly on the wall. And prior to that, I was using DSLRs that were a little bit bigger, a little bit clunky, and are a little bit noisier. I use Sony cameras. I have an A1 and an A9 and an A7R, but everybody kind of chooses their own tools in terms of that. And we have people that run the gamut in terms of what they use, but it really depends on what we're doing. In the rare occasion that we don't have something, we typically rent any additional equipment that we might need for bigger shows. But I was privileged enough to spend a little time with the people at Sony at a camera launch event in New York back in November, and they announced a new camera that for our needs was an absolute game changer, and I'm excited to get my hands on it. It's the A9 III, which has something called a global shutter. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with what that means, but most mirrorless cameras work with a rolling shutter. So we have a lot of LEDs that work in our environment, and they have a cycling effect. And sometimes we get banding on those images when we're shooting at high shutter speeds, which we often do to capture action. And the global shutter will completely remove that as an issue moving forward. And the technology and the tools are constantly changing and constantly getting better. I think that for us, that's super exciting, and it gives us an opportunity to try new things and experiment with new techniques.
Do you use flash at all?
No, we don't anymore. Way back when, I can't remember when we stopped doing this. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago. We
because you don't need to anymore.
We don't. Our television production has such high quality lighting, and the cameras have gotten so much better. We used to set up strobes on our lighting trusses, and the two ringside photographers would have a transmitter that triggered those lights, and for kind of the way that the old arena photographers would shoot sports if you were covering a basketball game or a hockey game, or even some boxing way back when. But we eliminated that from the process because we realized that, number one, that the quality of the cameras was getting better, the quality of the light was getting better for our television production, and also that it gave us more of an opportunity to see more depth into our images and incorporate a lot more of the television production into the visuals that we're creating.
Sure, and I imagine if the flash goes off, all of a sudden your lighting no longer matches everything else that's going on there. Now suddenly everything is uniform. Everything matches.
Right. If you go back and look historically at some of the older images, that's kind of it's a very different look, and it speaks to the era, which is fine. But this is a whole different approach, and I think more true to the big picture that we're trying to encapsulate and capture for covering the events.
Right. And the lighting changed dramatically when they stopped just lighting the ring, right? You look at old boxing matches and wrestling shows and so forth. They basically put a light at the top and it went straight down onto the ring. Mm-hmm. And now we're out in the audience with lights. Maybe they're colored due to the show's colors, blue for SmackDown, red for Raw, etc. But you see it, and that allows the fans to, again, be participating as part of the visuals of the show. And as far as like some of the photographers that Rich was alluding to, we have 3 staff photographers, and most of them use Sony, and we have, like Rich was saying, about 15 freelancers. Obviously, I would never, ever insist on what freelancers use. They can use whatever works best for them. And I'd say a good percentage of them use Sony, and the rest primarily Canon and Nikon. That's the only 3 groups we really pull from at this point for the people that we're using now. But we have a nice relationship with Sony. They've been, helping us as we go along here and working with us on a few things and letting us see some equipment early. Like Rich was invited to that launch to see that camera early, and loaning us some equipment for big events, that kind of relationship. And that's always a big plus for any kind of entity, whether any sports league or company that's working, to develop those relationships and so forth. We also, within our group, we use pro-grade cards for the most part. We use nothing but pro-grade readers. That's the card readers that we use. And then Rich could talk more about it, but our studio setup, if you discuss that, it's primarily fueled by pro photo equipment.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, so Rich, there's this other component, the studio photographs that have multi-light setups. Are those done concurrently or simultaneously as an event happens, as talent is there, or are those shoots separate?
For the most part, those shoots happen when we're producing our live television shows. So for many, if not all of those shows that we're doing, at least domestically, we set up an 8 or 9 light photo studio that's primarily fueled with pro photo lighting equipment, and it's a lot of packs and heads that allow us to do quick recycle times and things like that. We work with our television production team to secure space in each of the buildings that we're working in, and we set up a seamless background and a 8 or 9 light photo studio, and then based on the needs that the company has for what's happening that week, we'll have an assignment for photographing specific talent over the course of the day. And it's a little bit unscripted in terms of the timing for the way that stuff happens. So sometimes we have somebody backstage all day at a show and they're back there shooting all night. Other times the talent will only come in during the day before the show happens, but it's a little bit of a mix and match. And then sometimes we'll set up big shoots where we'll be photographing, a big talent ID shoot where we'll be photographing, 8, 10, 12, 15 talent in a given day. So they'll cycle through and we'll have a shot list of people that we need to do. So one of the most interesting things about working for this company is that you're not siloed to doing one thing. And I mean, over the many years that I've been working for this company, not only has the work evolved, but the scope of the different types of things that we're photographing has constantly changed. It's like action sports photography, it's high-level studio photography, it's documentary photography, it's
still life.
It's still life photography. It's there's a little bit of everything.
Weddings.
Yeah, there's a little bit of everything mixed in there. So it definitely keeps it fresh because very few of us are only doing one thing.
I would imagine social media probably forced you to be this way because there's a thirst for more and more information. And, after a while, you got to get out of the ring and do other things and have other forms of photography over the superstars and the environment and everything else.
We have a social media team, and they are separate from our team. They obviously go around and do a lot of things backstage and near the ring and so forth. And they are feeding our social media platforms. So they don't actually work for me, but they do give me, for our team, all of their images. So we catalog and store their images, but they take their own for the Instagram accounts and so forth. Now,
okay.
That doesn't mean they don't also take ours, and they use ours for various things all the time, where it's a combination of theirs and ours. But the more immediate need is usually met by the actual social media team. And then ours come up later after they are here in-house, like 3 days later, it's an anniversary of something, or they just want to show something that happened because it's going to be on TV that week or something.
Right.
Then they use ours. But I wanted to just really quickly about what Rich said. He's kind of downplaying how phenomenal this studio setup is, that we have a live TV show every Monday, every Tuesday, every Friday. Now, the Monday and Friday shows are live in some new city every single time. The Tuesday's basically in residence down in Orlando. So they have a studio set up, and that sits there and lives there. But the Monday and Friday, the Monday show rolls in. They unload the equipment for the entire show, the ring, the lights, the truss, including our lighting equipment. They roll it into a room that's designated for us. Rich and his team come in, or any of the photographers that are there. They come in, they set up this studio. Now it's a full-fledged studio like anywhere else. When the show's over, they break down all that equipment. They put it back in the boxes. Somebody takes those boxes, puts it back on the truck. It drives to the next town for the Friday show. And then for Monday, they repeat it again. And it does that all year round. Never comes home. It just keeps circling the entire United States, right? And so every week we're setting up and breaking down and shipping out 2 studio setups at least every single week. And that's pretty amazing, when you think about it.
Yeah.
It first of all, that's one of the reasons, even Rich is, I don't want to go into great detail, but we have like custom made cases to hold the equipment so that it lasts. And one of the reasons we use Pro Photos, because they're incredibly durable on top of being quality equipment, because it's a lot of banging around in a truck, driving down the highway, getting unloaded by some guy who throws it onto the wheels and wheels it into the room. It's pretty amazing how it's done. And then when you stop and think that it's done that way like 100 times plus a year, it's pretty
that might be the most location intensive production I've ever heard. I mean,
we could be a Consumer Reports testing lab for quality for photo equipment.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Pro Photo doesn't offer a white glove service for these sort of things.
So what they do is offer is a fleece. They have a really nice fleece that they hand out to people there.
Once upon a time they did, actually. I used to own one, but that's a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Yes.
It's cold in Brad's office, guys.
It's getting colder.
No, it really is an anomaly. There's really nothing like it in the world in terms of the way that we produce our stuff, the frequency that we produce our shows, and the wear and tear on all of the equipment that we use to produce our shows. It really is. It's one of one.
And it's not always in a room. It's not a private little room, everything. Sometimes it is. We have a door and we close it and it's just us. But then other times it's literally out in the hallway. It's near a loading dock with the doors open and it's winter. I mean, there's all kinds of situations we have to account for, that talent has to account for. Sometimes if it's something secret for later on, we have somebody pipe and drape it, and there's catering walking by and there's other people going by. It's a lot happening all at once. And it's pretty amazing, the intensity level. But I tell you, as a worker, and I know Rich feels the same way, you get caught up in how kind of exciting it is and what we do and how we just provide entertainment for a lot of people. It's a pretty great thing to be a part of, I have to say. I had said this earlier before we started. There are worse ways to make a living. It's pretty fun to be involved in. It's a very exciting place to be.
By the way, I have to apologize that the catering truck is running late today. Usually they're here by the break. I have to apologize.
Hey.
Rich, a question for you. Your website includes a bunch of these online photo diaries that you created for various WWE superstars. How often do you do this, and how much time do you spend with each of these superstars for the series?
Yeah, I mean, the need for that stuff kind of ebbs and flows. We haven't done that in a bunch of years, but Those projects were near and dear to my heart because I started off as an old school newspaper and wire service photographer. So the beginnings of my photography career were in photojournalism and news photography. So I loved doing that stuff because it was a very big departure from the rest of the stuff that we were doing. It was very low key and slow storytelling, where everything else we were doing was very colorful and bright and very much the antithesis of this type of thing. So we haven't done stuff like that in a little while, but as soon as you say it's not there or that we're not doing it again, maybe the need will come up again. But those projects were really fun. I really enjoyed them. We did them for many, many years through WrestleMania week, where we would highlight one of the superstars that was wrestling a big match, and we would literally spend the entire week, so 4 or 5 days leading up to the biggest match, including the day of show and after the show, with these superstars. So it was a very old school journalism approach to storytelling that was really fun.
So for our listeners, we're going to do a little experiment, okay? After listening to this show, contact the WWE and say, hey, whatever happened to that great little series you used to have that Rich was doing the diaries? We don't see it anymore. What happened with that? You should do more of that stuff. Let's just see if it makes a difference. And Rich, we're going to check in with you in a few months and just see if it made a dent in it. You never know. Just add a little bit of work to your schedule,
Please put more on our plate. We did really appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't even know whether that would fit in the schedule anymore. Things have changed so much, but
I just want to add pressure. That's all. Just add pressure to your job.
No, it was really fun. It also gives you an opportunity to really get a sense of what these superstars' lives are like and what they go through. And I mean, it would be like spending the day with Tom Brady leading up to a Super Bowl for the week, or spending a week with Wayne Gretzky before he was playing in the Stanley Cup Finals. Like, it's just, there's something really fun and different about that, and there were very private moments that were happening leading up to that stuff, and we would explain to them leading up to those projects that, like, listen, we want to have some pretty wide access to what we're doing here, and we want to make sure you're comfortable with that. And they fully had the opportunity to back out, and I don't think anyone did. Every time we made the ask, they all stepped up and agreed, and there were very few limitations in terms of what we were doing.
Well, you're not dealing with wallflowers. These are people who are out there anyway. These are people who like being watched and being the center of attention. So, you don't need a lot of bait, it seems to me, to get something like that going. And it's probably very enjoyable for both of you.
Yeah, they're a willing participant, and they are certainly good at what they do, and they know how to tell a story and develop a character, and that's part of what we're doing. And going out there and promoting that and being all in on that is something, for the most part, our superstars are really, really involved in what we do and very cooperative in what we do. And obviously, as it goes with any of this stuff, you could have the greatest photographer in the world, but if nobody shows up, then, and we have people that are pretty participatory in that way. And Rich being there for such a significant amount of time is certainly a plus for us and plus for me, because I know there's virtually no talent that we have that Rich doesn't have some kind of connection and or relationship with, right? By him.
Right.
And it's fun to bring in somebody new and all that stuff once in a while and get some new stuff. And that has its benefits too. But we have a core group that's been here for a significant amount of time, including Rich and some other people. And I always know if Rich goes to any show whatsoever, there's no talent he doesn't already know. So he can approach them, and that does nothing but work to our benefit because we all work for the same company. He's not a newspaper guy going to Giant Stadium to ask somebody something to do. He works for the team, right? So we all work for the same team, and I find them to be incredibly encouraging and easy to kind of involve themselves in what we do.
Now, speaking of the team, and this is for Rich, women wrestlers or superstars are somewhat more recent additions to WWE matches. Do you find there any kind of differences in photographing male and female, during these matches?
No, not at all. Honestly, the women have been participants in some of the biggest shows that we've had for as long as I've been working here, and I even from my earliest days working at WWE, there were some amazing female athletes that were putting on great matches. But honestly, from our approach in terms of covering the shows, there's really no difference between covering the men and the women. I think that the women really have been given more of a spotlight in recent years. We've had a standalone premium live event that was just women's matches a few years back, and they're central to the storytelling and the product that we put out there every single week.
I also want to point out that the women obviously have a forefront place on our company. They have matches that headline WrestleMania, which they have for the last couple of WrestleManias. They are absolutely 100% a big, huge portion of what we do. And they have great athletes, just as the men do. And the matches get time, and it's a lot of fun to cover. And as Rich was saying, our job is just go out and document what happens, but there's no real difference between covering one or the other. It's just you cover whatever happens in front of you. There's not any kind of strategy to do it differently by any means. In 2018, out at Nassau Coliseum, we had an all-women pay-per-view. Like the entire roster and every match was a women's match. We sold out that arena. It was a great show. And just to bounce over to the photographers, we have female photographers that work for Rich and I. One of them's on staff, a couple of freelancers. In 2022, down in Kentucky, the scheduling just worked out that way, and I just kind of put it together. And we had 3 women photographers and a female photo editor. So we had an all-female team, which I'm sure was probably the first time the company had done that, because it's been primarily men that have been shooting over the years. But it was an all-women's team. So on the photo level, also the women are contributing there. And it's just been, the amount of really talented photographers in this country, men and women, I find myself as in my position to be really fortunate to be able to kind of pick and choose who we want to work with and get some really talented people to work with us. And it's been exciting that way.
Rich, this is perhaps an unfair question, but do you have a favorite of the superstars to photograph and work with?
No, honestly, they're all so different, and everybody brings something different to the table. But the quality of the storytelling and the television production that the company creates is really so high level. Like it's hard not to have fun doing what we're doing out there. But I don't know that I necessarily enjoy photographing any one person over another. They're all such interesting people and interesting characters that really bring their own thing to the table every single week.
Okay. The idea of superstars has a big degree of fantasy to it, and superhero overtones. With that in mind, is there much retouching and post-production work that goes into the still photography to enhance the sense of superstardom?
I think that our retouching is simply to clean up the photo in the same way that everyone does retouching. It's the normal type of things that you just want it to be clean and representative. But my philosophy, and certainly the philosophy of our department and our team, is to not change the original intent of the image. We want to keep it true to whatever the image was. That's what we're kind of showing. And I think that our images show our talent in a favorable light, obviously. But I think that if anything is done that shows them in that heroic kind of way, it's because of the way they're photographed originally and the way our incredibly talented art department lays them out in key art and various places that they place them, and position them to make them look, as very much like superheroes, because that's how a lot of our fans look at them. So that's just kind of the way we shoot them, and we shoot them in that position. And the art department, it takes advantage of that in the same way that, some other people might for, larger than like superheroes that we have. But the retouching is minimal on that level. We don't really change the original part of the photo.
Have you guys been tinkering with AI at all? Because it's a perfect match for the kind of imagery that you're presenting. And before you answer, I just want to tell you, Brad, that I did note that on your website, it says Brad Smith, and the A in Brad and the I in Smith are the only letters that are italicized. Is this a subliminal heads up?
It's a Greek term for fleece. And it's only there for people who can read between the lines and then
and deliver fleece.
Yeah, okay. And deliver a fleece.
Oh, Brad, we got to do a show. We really do. We have to take this on the road. Okay.
So Rich and I both being members of the photo community for many years are always kind of curious about anything that comes along, Photoshop and digital cameras before that, et cetera, and so forth. And certainly we're both curious about and have read up on AI. We as a department or a company, or certainly department, our photo department, is not incorporating any AI tools at this moment.
Okay. It's obvious. It's just the beginning, but I mean, I also started tinkering around with it a little bit, and it's a double-edged sword. It's fascinating, and it's a slippery slope. But it seems to me that, again, the kind of imagery that you're portraying there, it's almost a natural to it. And yeah, if you could do it photographically without resorting to it, more power to you.
Yeah.
But I had to put it out there.
It'll be interesting to see where it goes. And I think nobody in our field is not keeping an eye on it to see how it develops and where it goes. It's kind of all over the map at this point, and there's a lot of conversations and debates and so forth. But we, as a department right now, are not involved in it at this point.
Mm-hmm. What about, within the broader scope of photography trends in the future, how do you see the production and use of still photography evolving within WWE?
Well, I think one thing we're going to do for the department in general is that, and we've kind of started that already by creating a relationship, which we now have a collaboration with ProGrade as a working collaborator with us. And I think going into the future, we're going to develop more of those. We're going to open that up and have an opportunity to work with companies that are to the forefront for technology and equipment. We're very interested in speaking with Sony about some robotics usages for remotes and the camera advancements, lens advancements, and so forth, software advancement, and so forth. So I think we're going to end up with more relationships and partners and collaborators as we go forward. That's something we're looking forward to a great deal. As for the photography, I will tell you, I worked at Time Inc., I worked at the New York Times, I worked for the government at one point, and no one uses as much photography across the board than this place does. I've never seen a place that uses it's everywhere. And that makes me feel good because obviously I oversee the department along with Rich that produces that art. And this company uses it in every facet of the promotion, of the marketing, of the merchandise, of the licensing, of the sales. So it's a never-ending rotation of new photography that we need. So I just see us growing more and more as we produce that art. This company is going to find more platforms for it to be used. Rich, you have anything with that?
I think you really covered it all. I think that we're always open to understanding how new equipment and new tools can help us evolve the work that we're doing. That was one of the reasons why I was so excited about that new Sony camera that they've just released, which we're really, at least I'm chomping at the bit to get my hands on so we can see what it does at our shows. I mean, that camera has the opportunity for us to be a real complete game changer, almost in the same vein as digital photography itself or mirrorless photography. I mean, this one for me feels like a really huge step up. And I had an opportunity to play with it a little bit. I talked with the people who helped create the camera, and any tool that can help us better cover our shows and create better images or create different images is something that we're interested in doing. Yeah. I mean, we're really in constant evolution, and that's really what our goal is here, to try to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to evolve and take great pictures that image the shows, the talent, the production that we're covering.
Rich, a question I have for you, because you're referring again to the new Sony global shutter. Is the advantage to you, the biggest advantage is going to be in terms of color quality and color consistency of exposure? Is that where you see the biggest advantage of this? Because I know it'll also capture flash at every shutter speed, but you're not using flash.
Yeah, I mean, well, we do use flash in our studio photography. So,
Oh, right. Okay, I take that back. Yes.
that's something completely new for us to explore, and that's that's what I'm saying. Like this tool has so many uses and has so much opportunity for us to really create and evolve and up our game in terms of what we're doing. But the global shutter in particular, there's a lot of lights, a lot of lasers, a lot of LEDs as part of the show that we put on every single week. And the rolling shutter of the current cameras that we're using sometimes truncates what we're seeing, and we don't get the full visual of what we're looking for. And that global shutter will be a complete game changer. It will basically become WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get.
I was just going to say, there will be true WYSIWYG in this change.
Yeah,
that's right.
exactly. So, and that for us, in terms of capturing the true vision of what our television production people are creating in terms of lighting, is something that we're really striving for. So, up until this point, we've been doing a really good job, but there's always a little bit of a consideration or a shortfall just because the technology doesn't allow us to.
So it's not just spinning propellers that are going to be cured by this camera.
You look at your picture, you're like, I missed the lasers again.
Yeah, I mean, like it is funny. Like, I mean, when you're seeing lasers and there are all these incredible colors and they're coming from all these different angles, and then you look at your picture and it's not quite what you saw, and I don't know, it does leave you a tiny bit disappointed, but that's just the evolution. I mean, we're still light years ahead of where we were when we were shooting with strobes, because we never got any of that stuff before.
I feel the same way, Rich, with the pyro that we have fireworks at certain shows if the arena allows it, or it's open air stadium and WrestleMania and things like that. And to capture that pyro, it's almost like you have to just shoot the fireworks and then someone else shoots a different picture because they're different exposures. And it's really hard to get all that and take advantage of it.
No, it flattens out the whole spectrum, and the whole lighting situation, which is really tremendous.
I hope the three of you can come to a show sometime. I don't know if you've been to a live show, but I will tell you, if you do come, it's very cold inside the arena. But also, I think you would absolutely be fans if you came. It's an exciting, fun thing. If anybody who's like, wrestling is what it is, and it's fascinating, and it's really fun, and it lets you just kind of like have a great time for a couple hours, like going to the movies or anything else that you paid money to go see in entertainment, right? It's all kind of the same thing. It's for you to just kind of release and escape for a while and enjoy yourselves. And our shows, if you could come to a show and see like kids' faces when the talent comes out, and you could see the fans cheering and you see the interaction, and we do a lot of community work as well. Rich sees a lot of that where they get to do one-on-one, at a boys club or a school we visit and things like that. And you see it happen in front of you, and you're like, this is really a fun thing, and it's positive, and it's exciting for the people that are being entertained by it. And it's really, especially the kids and so forth, and you watch it. And we're just there to record what they're doing and document it. And to me, that's my favorite stuff. And I love the wrestling stuff, and I love the spectacle of the fireworks and the lasers and all that stuff. But once in a while, we'll get a photo at an event where one of our superstars is meeting a child, and they're doing a little fist bump, or they're doing something that's kind of organic. And it just, especially if you have kids, it just kind of melts your heart. Like, this is a good thing that we're doing, and I really am proud of this company and proud of the photo department to capture everything that they do.
Well said.
Well, I'd say we've come a long way. I remember as a kid watching, I don't remember if it was Channel 9 WPIX or 11 or something like that. And it was black and white, and it was wrestling. And I remember we used to watch it. It was like Mountain Dan was one of the guys I used to see. And there were a whole bunch of them. And I remember, but that's one of my little childhood memories. But we've come a long way since then, I guess.
Yeah. It's definitely, the production value has gone up considerably. The no smoking thing helps a lot too, by the way.
That was another thing too, when they were able to smoke while wrestling. That, those were real men.
Yes, yeah.
Real men.
Exactly. I agree.
Anyway, Brad Smith and Rich Freeda, it's been a pleasure speaking with you guys today. Brad, any kind of upcoming projects or events you got coming up you want to tell us about?
Yeah, for sure. We have a lot of things on the table that we're always doing. We're going to France and Germany this summer with some big shows. which is great for us. That will be in Berlin and Lyon, France. So that's exciting because they're international shows. We're going to be in Tampa in a few weeks for Royal Rumble, which is one of our big premium live events. It's in St. Petersburg is the show, and we're in that area for a few days. And then we have WrestleMania in Philadelphia in April, which is a 2-day event, the first weekend in April, and that'll be in the stadium where the Eagles play. So those are the big things on the horizon in the next few months. And other than that, we're just doing the shows that we normally do and moving forward. It's a fun time to be here.
Oh, Brad, you forgot the show furthest from where we are. In February, we're going to Perth, Australia.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost as far as you can go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 3 business days, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. we're going there for a single show in February.
Wow.
It's in a big outdoor soccer stadium. I'm sure it'll be
60,000 seats.
It'll be incredible, but that's the furthest one.
You're right. I forgot about that one. Sorry about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, Rich, aside from this, what else you got coming up?
I think that pretty much covers it. I think I'm going to spend a lot of time on airplanes this year.
Yeah.
That's it. Oh, hey, listen, it's good. It's this is what you wanted to do when you were a little kid, and there, boom, you got your dream come true.
No,
You're doing
it really is fun. I mean, when I was in college and was first exposed to photography, the only thing I wanted to do was photograph sports and rock concerts. And this is like kind of the perfect hybrid of both of them. And little did I know that this was going to be the career path for me for most of my work life.
Well, you're a blessed man to be able to say that, seriously, because when you're doing what you love doing every day, it doesn't get better than that. So leave it at that. Anyway, Brad Smith, Rich Freeda, again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great talking with you, and have to have you back again sometime when new lighting comes up and new little tricks from WWE.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure speaking with both of you. If you are a fan of the show but not yet a subscriber, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. You can also find us on the Explorer blog, where we post photos from our guests along with our show notes. And please join us on Facebook at the B&H Photography Podcast group, where you can share your favorite photos and comments about the show. I'm your host, Alan White. Jill Waterman is our creative producer. Episodes are recorded, mixed, and edited by technical producer Mike Weinstein. Our executive producer is Bjorn Peterson, and our editorial director is Sean Steiner. On behalf of all of us, thank you oh so much for tuning in today.
Thanks to Pelican for sponsoring this week's episode.